Hi, everyone. My name is Olamide. I am one of the trustees at Open House Lagos. And today I'm going to be interviewing Lloyd Martin. He is a Zimbabwe-born architect and was recently announced the winner of the design competition organized by VOEN Foundation. And he was actually the lead competition designer for Studio 8 Fold. And the project envisions a form of urbanism that enhances a symbiotic relationship between man and water by adopting an approach that tends towards sustainability. And for the past 2 years, Lloyd has helped set up and lecture at the architecture department in the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and during which he conducted research and has worked with the great Demas Nwoku. So it's really great that we have Lloyd with us today. We're just going to talk through his project that was the lead competition winner for the VOEN Foundation. So thanks, Lloyd, for joining. Great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. It's it's a privilege to be a part of this. Thank you.
No, it's really cool. Okay, so maybe we'll just dive right into it. Can you kind of describe the proposal? How did you go from the brief to the competition concept?
So, I mean, for me, I kind of, this whole project in its entirety was almost my love letter to my experiences that I had in Nigeria. It was such an incredible time there that, I really wanted to kind of complete and finish a project within the context that I had just learned about and take all these experiences that I've had and translate them directly into a competition. And the VOEN Foundation brief was perfect for that, because it dealt with some very real issues while still being an ideas competition. So it allowed me to explore a more kind of conceptual idea. So the competition just basically represents a manifestation of all of my different ideas about my personal beliefs, like you mentioned, in urban metabolism and circular economy, and this kind of new form of urbanism that has to start manifesting itself in order to stop these elements of climate change and all these types of things. And the competition brief, it specifically asked for a response to the rising flood levels in Nigeria, or in Lagos specifically. So it was just about, how do I take all these different problems and issues, especially with the rising levels of water in Nigeria, and create a project that doesn't see it as a negative, but actually it takes it as a positive. So I really wanted to create a beautiful vision of what a life on water can be, that incorporates all these different flows, like metabolism flows of water, energy, this. And I wanted to create a new vision of, okay, you take all these different things, you create this positive environment, and how does that manifest itself with the right kind of vision and all these lessons that I've learned from my time in Nigeria? That answers your question.
Great. Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure you probably answer all these questions kind of intertwined anyway, but it's good to kind of dwell on some of the very kind of important parts. So, yes. I mean, sustainability was key. It was asked in the brief, and it was key in the project. Can you explain how this featured in the different elements of like water, waste, food, energy, materials, and also thinking about the future of Lagos? Because I think that obviously the project, and maybe you'll show some images, the project is quite futuristic, and it kind of asks about how this city in Lagos, this water city, can be kind of visualized for the future. So can you just explain a little bit how sustainability kind of flows through those different aspects?
Yeah, so I'll share my screen with you shortly. Just to get onto the idea of this kind of futuristic vision as well. The only thing that's really futuristic about my proposal is the form of the urbanism, in a way, because all of the elements that I have utilized are tried and tested elements that currently exist within our kind of working environment. So it was just simply by combining these things in a unique and different way that it created a more futuristic vision, but it's very, very grounded in reality. All the materials, all the systems are all available for us as architects and urban designers to use at the moment. So it really was a more grounded vision of reality and the futuristic projection. So I think what will be easiest for me to explain is if I just share my screen with you now.
Sure.
And then we can kind of just go through the imagery and help to understand like my thinking and the systems thinking that I had behind this. So, first of all, this image just kind of represents the overall beauty and the kind of aesthetic that I wanted to introduce into the project, to show you that, with these kind of competitions, a lot of the time when people are designing for these international, like African competitions, the imagery is always the same. It's always very sympathetic to an African situation in a way. So I wanted to show that, like, no, like if we just embrace a new form of African architecture, something really unique and incredible and positive, and an amazing thing can happen if we start to do this. So if we just go through, so I really wanted to, again, introduce my ideas of urban metabolism. So I just developed a very simple, like, structural system that could be manifested in a few different ways. And through the simple structural system, which I'll get onto shortly, I could incorporate all these different flows. And the flows that I focused in on was water, waste, energy, and food. And seeing and how these kind of completely important and intrinsic elements to our our survival can be thought of as architectural instruments, of urban instruments, and start to actually manifest the way in which we envision these new kinds of spaces. So I kind of focused in on all these different flows, and then started to design a architectural response that would adapt and kind of help to close this circular economy system. So instead of seeing waste as an end product of the system, we actually see it as a starting point of a brand new cyclical economy. So instead of just seeing waste as a product that will just we have to deal with, it's actually a valuable resource, and that can then create a new kind of value chain that can inform and start to better a community kind of feel. So my whole idea was that I utilize all of the space that's potentially going to be flooded across the whole of Lagos as a starting point to create these community clusters that are built upon this kind of structural system that I'll get into later. But I really envision that by 2050, if this kind of idea is adopted, it could really spread across the whole of the Lagos Bay, the Lagos Lagoon. And it'll open up so much valuable land, because land is incredibly valuable at the moment in Lagos, and as it's losing it, why not actually take back some of that land whilst still not damaging the kind of ecosystem, like with the products of like with the kind of development of Eco Atlantic, which is just completely destroying the ecosystem. That this allows for to reclaim that land whilst not necessarily damaging it. In fact, it enhances the current ecosystem there. So I envisioned it as a brand new structural system that it utilizes the offshore wind farming technology to create a monopile in which these new forms of habitation could kind of manifest themselves off of. The reason why I chose this monopile system is that a lot of the time, the solutions for these kinds of competitions, when you're building on water, is for this kind of floating option. And the very real reference that we had for this project, we just saw how that, I don't know, I probably won't mention it, but the system itself didn't work. It was praised and lauded and all this stuff, but once there was a heavy wind, it just got completely knocked down. And it's still being praised to this day, but it was essentially a failure. So I wanted something more grounded, more stable. So these houses weren't actually floating, but they were grounded. They were actually, piled down and provided a very, very stable base for these community clusters to flourish. So basically,
and actually, you have not to butt in, but actually, a lot of the houses in Makoko have the same kind of piling system already. Yes. So it's it's something that is already being used in Lagos. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so it's exactly that. Is that I looked at the current system of like, okay, the pile system works. Like that's how people are used to it. So I thought, okay, what system, like how can this actually be implemented in a very kind of not mass produced, but a very kind of controlled way. And they have these systems already for the, like I said, the wind farms. And then it got me thinking, it's like, why can't these houses themselves actually be the energy generation? And if you imagine that each of these piles, I don't know if you can see below, as they're driven, you have a wind generator at the top. So you have a house that's generating enough energy to produce enough energy for the whole community. And then once you have enough of these communities, that energy can then provide enough energy for the whole of Lagos. So you're killing two birds with one stone. You're providing the housing, the urbanism, all these different elements, and essentially, you're creating enough energy, sustainable energy, to power Lagos, which is another issue that it's tackling. And once you start to build these things together, instead of having this very technologically advanced thing with like windmills and all this, like it can actually provide a very beautiful community cluster where the interconnectivity between all these different elements really start to form a beautiful community between the people. And that's something that I've noticed about my time in Nigeria, is that sense of community, that sense of belonging to a certain area is very, very important. So it was essential to provide a singular house for people, to give them the dignity of that kind of space, but then to provide an element that connects all these people together, to provide a sense of security, a sense of community, a sense of belonging to that space that people can adopt, and people can then fish off these bridges that connect everything. And it's I really wanted to explore that notion.
Great.
And then
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
And then it was like, okay, but then you also need to provide other functions to the people. And in terms of, if it's all going to be wood, you need to have kind of fire services as well. Maybe policing is not necessarily the best example to be using at the moment, considering what's happening in Lagos and Nigeria. But then, hospital services. And then, because of this urban metabolism idea, you can take these elements and combine them together in a kind of central hub, where these community clusters can then be kind of surrounded by and informed by that. It kind of just combines them together, and it makes it very easy for people to know where to go when they need these kind of extra governmental provided services. Mm-hmm. And this kind of just talks about the metabolism and the way that I've thought about each of these individual houses. So each of them is a completely closed loop, where it can either capture water at the top in a platform that's designed to have about 60 square meters of arable land, or it can provide energy. And the combination of like either energy or land production, and so these things can start to, each individual household can start to provide enough food for itself and for its neighbors as well. And you have things like an aquaponic system at the bottom on a floating platform, because obviously people need to access the houses from an element. And if the tides are changing, you need to have something that can float up and down. Mm-hmm. So why not have a floating platform that then connects onto the other elements? And below that, you can actually have, fishing nets that you can stock fish in and provide your own food. And in ensuring that water is all filtered through and captured and stored, you can actually start to clean the water that's around you. And then thinking about other things like the human waste as well. And, if we can capture that waste and then provide a central kind of area where that waste can then be processed, and this is proven technology, and it's utilized technology, then people can actually start to benefit from waste instead of just seeing it as this product that we need to get rid of. So by storing all of this waste, we can then collect it in a certain area, refine that into a biogas and biomass, and then potentially provide it back to the people as utilizable cooking gas or heating gas or whatever that might be, and providing a civic function that is beneficial for both the gas providers and the people living there. Then just a bit about the structure as well. Like I said, it was built upon a monopile foundation. So you have the singular element going up that either has the wind generating element or a rainwater harvesting element. And then it utilizes the local wood. I forget the name. It's Akun, and I think Eki was the two major natural woods that are actually found in the Lagos Lagoon because there's a big market for it at the moment. And so the whole structure kind of is based off of these things, and it's very, very modular. So it can be built like very effectively and cost effectively. And because of the modular nature, they can be adapted to fit, you know, from 2 to 12 people living in each individual household. And then again, just going through all these spaces, I've worked out like how does, because obviously you have the circular form, and it's quite difficult to obviously plan out spaces within that. But if you embrace that idea of living in the circular form, it really allows for an amazing utilization of a very, very small footprint to provide people with, you know, quite a beautiful building, you know, quite a beautiful space in the end, because you have these 360 views. You can imbue it with a lot of natural elements as well. You have outside balconies, and because of the, you know, the beautiful nature of all the wood elements as well, it'll be a very, very warm, light-filled, and beautiful space in the end. And it's not just this kind of industrialized version of wind and energy creation, etc. Yeah, so in the end, I just really wanted to again, like I said, you know, do this project as a love letter to my experience in Nigeria. And one of the things that I did was I named the project Water No Get Enemy, after Fela Kuti's famous song from 1978, I think it was. No, before then, but 1975.
Yeah, okay.
And it's, for me, it kind of represented everything that I wanted to explore. You know, like Fela, through the song, you know, he kind of even mentioned and hinted to the fact that if the government actually just embraced the unique kind of area and the unique kind of opportunities that the cultural and the ecological context provide, they'll be way better off than, you know, trying to manifest it in different ways. So, you know, I wanted to show how beautiful a life on water can be. Instead of showing a solution to like a problem, I wanted to show you that the solution is a way better way to think about it. It's not just trying to solve an issue, it's embracing the issue and showing you by embracing this kind of these issues, you can actually come up with a very beautiful and a very realistic, in a way, kind of project.
Great, thanks so much, Lloyd, for taking us through the project. It's really inspiring because lately I've been talking to a lot of people around the idea of visioning and visioning like alternative futures, because we tend to be complacent, or I won't say complacent, but we tend to kind of continue in the path that we know. And it's not, as you said, it's not like these things that you've put together don't already exist. They exist in different forms. Yeah. But it's also about visioning, okay, how can we provide energy, but not necessarily in the way that we're thinking already, but like, you know, in an alternative way? Or how can we think about housing in a different way? How can we make sure it's still sustainable, but also accessible and affordable for people? So I really love that idea of visioning something different, but even if it's not about future thinking, even it's just visioning something different. And I think that's really, really great and powerful. And also the idea of like living with the environment. I think we try to shy away from living with water. And I think that was something that Grief really tried to hone in on how, you know, in Lagos, we are a water city, but then we're not really looking to how we can live with water. We're always trying to kind of push it away or use it, but not actually live with it. So I think that's something that the project that you've done, it really kind of works with really well. But my question is about this water idea. Like, why do you think it's so important to start to build and develop the city with water in mind?
I think because these very real ideas of climate change and all these kinds of ideas of flooding. I mean, if you've ever lived in Lagos, you realize that dealing with water is about 50% of your day. Every day, if it rains, you have to worry about flooding. You have to, the whole change of ecology now. I mean, even traffic is a major issue for me. When, you know, every time I used to come from Ibadan down to Lagos, I would be stuck in traffic and I would see a completely free open waterway that went exactly to where I wanted to go. And I was thinking, like, why can't I jump onto a boat and just get a boat to where I go to in a way bigger highway, essentially, than the third mainland bridge here. So I think that there's so much more opportunities to a life on water than there are to kind of just trying to build upon the existing land that's there. And you know, with all these different elements, that there's so much more to work with on water, and there's so much more to kind of benefit from this life on water.
Cool. Okay, I mean, I totally agree with you, and I think it's something that we are sort of appreciating a bit more, but I think there's still a lot more to do. I mean, we can see that there's obviously water transport becoming a big thing now. Well, it's not as big as it should be, but it's getting there. And we can also see that people are kind of building, and not just necessarily because the land is available, but because, you know, they actually want to appreciate living by the waterfront. So I can see that is definitely moving forward. But I think we, as we've done with the project, we definitely need to make more of an effort to start living with water rather than kind of against it. Yeah. So I think lastly, because we kind of talked about the project and how amazing it is, and we kind of gone through like how you went from the brief to you know, the project itself. The last kind of question, and I'm going to bring two questions together, is that you've worked in Lagos, I want to actually Nigeria, because you worked in Ibadan mostly, for like about 2 years, is that right?
Yeah.
About 2 years, yeah. And you've worked with them as in Woku, which is fantastic. And I guess my question is, and now you've kind of moved away from Nigeria, what are you going to take away? What are the 3-4 lessons that you think, you know, from working here, what's going to influence your practice moving forward?
For me, it was like a lot of my kind of architectural idea has been completely changed by the amazing work of someone like Demis Nwoku. And I think the way that it's going to change moving forward now is that you know, like working especially as an architect in somewhere like Nigeria.
Oh no, the internet's frozen.
Of Nigeria, when, you know, you're designing for a certain kind of temperature, it represents freedom for me. You don't have to think about enclosure. You don't have to think about space the same way that you would in Europe or in the south of Africa, like I'm used to. So my sense of what architecture is and how it can manifest itself is completely different now, because I think of spaces as more transitory, more open, more. It challenged the way that I think about architecture a lot. You know, sitting down with Demis and hearing him speak about the way that he designed his buildings and the reasons for him designing his buildings. You know, because a lot of the time my thinking tells me that architecture should always be open with big windows and like looking out into the view and this. Whereas if you see the work of Demis, like it's very enclosed, it's very insular, it's very comfortable, and his utilization of light and like these shadows, and it's very dark and but beautifully like radiant dark in a way. And he was just telling me that, you know, when in a westernized context, when you're designing for architecture, like when we're working inside for 95% of the day, when we want to go back home and experience like a architecture, we want to be connected to nature still. And that's why buildings are open with big windows and this, so we still connected to nature despite being indoors. Whereas in a Nigerian context, where you feel so comfortable to be out, and when people are typically outside for 95% of the day, coming back home represents a kind of a refuge from the outside. So it's about how you provide this refuge with this amazing, beautiful space. So it's those kind of ideas where I don't necessarily agree with a lot of those principles, but the idea that it's challenged the way that I thought about architecture and the way that I thought about how architecture can relate to nature as well. And, you know, especially with the way that he imbued a lot of his work with kind of cultural identity. You know, a lot of the time I spent working with his grandson, Rufus Nwoku, on the New Culture Studio in Ibadan. And what that building represented was an idea, a manifestation of how a new wave of Nigerian cultural thinking was implemented after a kind of post-colonial Nigeria, and how they were thinking about what is this new culture that people of that time were trying to create. And once you understood what they were trying to do and what they were doing, and you can start to relate that to the architectural work that is manifested there, it really just opened me up to a whole different spectrum of like, okay, so architecture can be manifested, or can be this manifestation of culture, whilst being both ecologically and culturally rooted at the same time. Ooh, I think I've lost your...
I'm actually muted. No, it's me. Thank you so much, Lloyd. This has been so good. I think that's probably the end at this point, because I think we've done like 30 minutes or so. So it's been so good to kind of understand the project, what you've kind of learned through your time in Nigeria. And to me, I think the big takeaway is just kind of being able to visualize an alternate future, or even an alternate present, to be honest, and how that's very important. And I'm saying this because I feel like at this point in Nigeria, we've kind of gone through this, we've gone through so much turmoil in the past couple of weeks, and trying to kind of visualize an alternate future is possible, but it's about how do we now get there. So I think that's really, really great that you've kind of done that in your project, and bringing in the idea of different systems in terms of sustainability, but also climate change, and also just kind of like living within a space and living with the environment. So thank you so much, Lloyd, and it's been great, and hopefully we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to speak with you.
Cool.